final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what everyone has seen before. Hello and welcome everyone to Podcast Enterprise. This is our podcast where we analyze and dissect all the Star Trek, the original series episodes for story structure, the character arcs, anything we like and dislike, and the whole thing in between. I am Bala Ramadurai, and with me I have my co-host Parvati Ramkumar. Say hello, Parvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Podcast Enterprise. I'm so glad to have you here. Today, we'll be talking about some alien overlords.
Yes, by any other name, Shakespearean dialogue becoming the title of this episode. See what's that all about?
When this episode opens, you have the Enterprise answering a ship's distress call, and Captain Kirk forms his landing party that includes himself, Spock, McCoy, Lieutenant Shea, and Yeoman Thompson. They beam down to this planet looking for survivors. Now, what happens there is that planet looks quite uninhabited, and yet Yeoman Thompson's sensors pick up a human presence somewhere over there. And that is when the landing party, including Kirk, is accosted by a male and female. They look human, but then they tell Kirk and the crew that they're not actually human. They are members of the Kelvin Empire of the Andromeda galaxy, and they're here to take over the Milky Way. Simple as that. And they want the Enterprise. Kirk and the landing party cannot allow this, but these Kelvins have technologies that they haven't seen before. They're able to paralyze people at will with some belt device that they have, imprison Kirk and the landing crew so that they can begin preparations to take over the Enterprise. Their idea is to take over the Enterprise, modify its engines and capacities, and take it all the way back to Andromeda so that they can bring back more people. And this is a trip apparently that will take 300 years after their modifications to the Enterprise. So while Kirk and the crew and the landing party is in the small jail cell, they're blocked off by bars that their phasers cannot penetrate. They try tricks. Spock tries his mind meld. Nothing happens other than him getting a whiplash, a mental psychic whiplash. As punishment, one of the Kelvins, Rojan, the male Kelvin, in charge of the entire operation, reduces Yeoman Thompson and Lieutenant Shea to some sort of dehydrated, chalky geometric form. And he actually crumbles one of those forms, thereby killing Yeoman Thompson. And he says this is the punishment that all of Kirk's crew is going to face, including Kirk, if they don't do as he says. Now, this turns into a huge issue. They take over the Enterprise. There are very few Kelvins. I think there's only Rojan, Kelinda, the woman they met on the planet along with him. There's Hanar, Rhea, who's a navigator, and a Tomar. So all of these Kelvins are now aboard the Enterprise. The crew of the Enterprise, the human crew of the Enterprise is having a problem. The Kelvins are physically in human form, but they are not quite human, and they're getting used to human form. So there are some foibles and quirks that they have to get used to. They have to cross a negative energy barrier at the end of the Milky Way so that they can cross over into Andromeda. And both Spock and Scotty decide to come up with an idea that will somehow explode the ship once they cross the barrier, but Kirk is hesitant to give the order, which turns out to be a bit of a mistake because after they cross the barrier, Rojan decides to turn most of the crew into those little chalky geometric shapes because those are non-essential personnel. According to the Kelvins, the only essential personnel are Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty. That's all they need. They don't need anybody else. They don't need Uhura. They don't need Nurse Chapel. They don't need anybody. Now, this is when Kirk realizes that the Kelvins are not quite human, but they are in human form. They are literally trapped in their human bodies. They did this so that they can enter the Enterprise and make that voyage back to Andromeda. Because they are in human form, they are also experiencing human emotions. And so Kirk decides to have a little fun with them and maybe distract them long enough to get the ship back. So he decides to seduce Kelinda. Who knows she's being seduced, but she finds it very amusing. Tomar is taken care of by Scotty, who gives him a lot to drink and he knocks himself out drinking. Hanar, the other Kelvin, is taken care of by Dr. McCoy, who injects him with all sorts of things and has him so jittery and nervous that he starts disobeying orders. And Rojan suffers the most of all because he seems to be jealous of Kelinda and Captain Kirk, and that drives him insane. So they don't know how to deal with these human emotions, and this episode actually focuses on that, how much the human psyche and the human body can do, and if you're not used to it, it's going to drive you crazy. And eventually there is a fist fight, because there has to be a fist fight, and after that Rojan, he is too tired to argue anymore and gives the controls of the Enterprise back to Kirk. Back to you, Bala.
So in here also it has a 4-act structure. This episode has a 4-act structure with a teaser at the start. The teaser is on a lovely planet and the landing crew with 2 red shirts and usual, I think Scott was not there. Scott was in command, so it was Spock, McCoy, and Lieutenant Shea, said, and Yeoman Thompson.
Shea.
But where are these people? And it ends, interestingly, that this alien comes up and says, I'm going to capture your ship. Not only that, we're going to end humans as they are today. The end of their existence is what he threatens the landing party. So that's the teaser. The first act starts with no captain's log, but the communicators and the weapons of and the tricorders of the crew, who are now in a paralyzed state, they're whisked away from them and they're sort of kept in a pile, and now they know that they've been conquered, so quote unquote conquered by these Kelvins. This act is all about us knowing about what are these Kelvins, and of course there's a jailbreak or an attempted jailbreak, which results in the end of the first act, which is the punishment meted out to Captain Kirk, that he has to see his people die. And one of them, Yeoman Thompson, dies in a very peculiar form. That is, first of all, they are reduced to these, I believe it's a regular dodecahedron, a 12-sided polygon, 3D shape. That's what they become, and they're crushed into powdery state in which they can't be recreated back. So Yeoman's dead because Lieutenant Shea comes back to life, and that's his punishment. Second act starts with Spock trying to piece all the visions that he has had from Kelinda's mind. That's when they realize that these are aliens with 100 limbs or tentacles, and they have given up a whole bunch to become what they are, what they look like inside, encased into these quote-unquote shells, as Rojan refers to them later. The second act is about Rojan and the entire crew of Kelvins, the 4 or 5 of them taking over, and it is again McCoy and Kirk's attempt to break free of the Kelvins. Of course, at the end, what Captain has to decide is whether to order his crew members to destroy the Enterprise along with the Kelvin so that they can end the Kelvin threat. However, that would also result in their own destruction. So that's the conflict that Captain Kirk has at the end of the second act. The third act is about Kirk deciding not to go the suicidal route, and they're facing the barrier between the galaxies, the energy barrier. They do get past the barrier. Turns out Rojan already knew about their suicidal plan. This act is all about basically Kirk, McCoy, Scott and Spock, the only remaining people who are in human form, not in the dodecahedron form. The rest are all made into this shape. Them hitting a rock bottom in this act, which is they don't have any way, looks like they're out of ideas. However, Spock hits upon this idea that, hey, there's something we could do is stimulate the senses. And that's when the conflict, each of them take one-on-one. Tomar takes Scott, McCoy takes Hanar, Kirk takes on Kelinda, and Spock sort of takes on Rojan as well. Rojan is also up against Kirk and Kelinda. So a lot of that's how it ends in this conflict. Kelinda is asked not to meet Kirk. Rojan, he's acting like a typical Bollywood villain more than a Star Trek sort of bad guy. So he says, "Do as I say," and he gets very emotional. So that's clearly shown that he's emotional, and that's Rojan realizing that he's become emotional is the end of the third act. That's where the fourth act starts. Of course, like Parvati summarized, it has to end with a fist fight, and we did have a fist fight. Finally, the command is relinquished to Kirk, and Kirk says, "We can be friends. You don't have to be conqueror and conquered, but we can be friends, and we will have you live in one of the planets. All are welcome to this galaxy." So that's how it ends, the fourth act, and there's no funny quip at the end or a long shot where you can see all the members. You don't even see them revived. So, Parvati, how did you like By Any Other Name?
I quite enjoyed it. I liked seeing how the Kelvins were supposed to be these ultra intellectual, super brainy, tentacled overlords. Suddenly they decide to become human and they lose their minds because they have no idea what to do with the human form. They don't know how to deal with all of these ridiculous emotions that are flooding their systems. They feel hunger, they feel thirst, and they get addicted to alcohol pretty quickly. And it's also, if once you take this human form, you're also putting yourself at the mercy of people like Kirk and McCoy, which is pretty hilarious. Actually, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, that was fun. I thoroughly enjoyed the Tomar versus Scott the most in all of this.
Yeah.
That is because Scott, we know, is as portrayed in this episode, is so anything related to Scotland or anything related to drinking, he is all for it. So he doesn't do it as a recreational thing. He doesn't do it as a social occasion thing. But it's all in the line of duty. That's the best part in all the confrontation at the end of it. To me, what I also sort of brought about in this episode is Kirk's charm with women, right? So they overplay it in the new series, in the Star Trek new series, but I don't think it's that. He's actually quite measured. He's not like they pretty much portray him like a womanizer in the new Star Trek, but he's not. I appreciate the flowers as much as I appreciate the beauty of a woman. Yeah. That's what he's trying to do, but again, this is also in the line of duty for him, and he did it quite well. So McCoy was McCoy. So this is the only way he does it. So he does that pretty well. Keeps stoking Hanar in one way or the other. But Spock was, for me, clearly ahead of all of them. So this is one episode where you can see that the idea actually came from Spock. So this is very different for me, because he's usually playing second fiddle to Kirk. Kirk is the inspired one usually.
Yeah.
All the time. But this one time, it is Spock who was the inspired one, who noted stuff that no one else noted. Kirk, I have to do this. I'm going to be rational with this. He's feeling pity for... You can see him, right? The pain that he goes through when he sees that all of his team members are reduced to these little shapes, and he doesn't even want to walk down that corridor because there are so many of them and they could easily die. He's so careful, he's feeling for it, and he takes that ash or whatever, the essence of Yeoman, and really feels for her. So it's super part of what we saw in this episode.
Yes. It is very interesting to see also how the Kelvins reacted to being human. Of all the races in the Milky Way galaxy, a race that just, the Kelvins, they sacrificed everything for intellectual capacity is what Spock said. So they sacrificed emotions, they sacrificed feeling, they sacrificed their sense of taste. They sacrificed all of these things so that they can be the best minds they can be. And what do? They come to the Milky Way and choose the most emotional, irrational race of all in the entire galaxy and decide to take their forms. It can't be good. It can't end well. This is another case where I thought that it might have suited them better to choose the Vulcans. I mean, the galaxy would have gotten overrun within a minute. But of course, they had to choose humans, and it was pretty hilarious to watch how they were adjusting or trying to adjust to their human forms. Because you see Tomar looking at the human crew, the remaining human crew, eating food, and he's wondering what that is and what a waste of time until he tastes it, and then he's gone. But
All it took was the food from the synthesizer for him to flip to the other side.
yeah, it's from the synthesizer, huge delicacy, gourmet meals, and he's completely taken in by that. And then you have Kirk, like you mentioned, Kirk did go through a lot of emotional turmoil because his entire crew has been reduced to these porous substances, and one wrong move can have them all killed. And this is very, very traumatic for him as a captain. He's supposed to be protecting them, and he couldn't do it because the Kelvins are just so powerful with their technology. So the only way out is to distract them in some way. And it is Spock who gave him that idea, because Spock got some insights into what the Kelvin mind is like by trying to perform that mind meld with Kelinda. And he knows that they are these creatures, they are these huge tentacled creatures, but they are restricted in their human shells. And this is where Kirk decides to be a little creative. And I also found it quite interesting, Bala, when he went to see Kelinda in an attempt to seduce her. She says, "Ooh, you're trying to seduce me." She's interested. It's very. She saw right through it. But yeah, she's open to the idea anyway, because these emotions are all new and she wants to know how it feels. But and then you also have McCoy injecting Hanar with all sorts of substances and making him so jittery and jumpy and insubordinate. I like that part. It was pretty interesting, because until that point, you see Hanar being so sedate. He doesn't show anything, no emotions. He just follows orders. He does what Rojan tells him to do. And then after he's injected with several doses of that whatever McCoy injects him with, he loses
Some
his
portion,
marbles.
yes. Right from the teaser, it looked like the Kelvins were scheming, right? So they use a distress call to somehow attract the passing by ships so that they can conquer.
Yeah.
They're already starting to use these scheming things and get the USS Enterprise, lure them like, I don't know, like one of those Venus flytrap or something like that, right? Like a conquering race, you'd probably call them for battle. And they know they're at a clear disadvantage and they have to use trickery. So he's caught the captain. But while they're doing that, he's also sent his people to go and conquer the ship. So it's all scheming, well planned. It's not like a conqueror, but it's more like a scheming thing that is going on. So
exactly.
I found that a different kind of approach. Like if this was, say, the Klingons, right? Take the bugle sound. Everybody. So they would do it by force. They would do it in a displaying sort of manner. But these guys are like right under the radar. They know they are outnumbered. Yes, they're intellectually superior. They have better technology, but still they know their limitations. They have to do it this way.
True, but at the same time, they're not as intelligent as they thought they were, because who would take a human form if you weren't used to it? And they did not obviously do enough research into humanity, otherwise they wouldn't have made such a huge and stupid mistake. They would have chosen the Vulcans, I'm pretty sure.
I also that raises the question, when did they studies then? So if their ship, they came on a life craft, and this was just a distress call in every direction. How do they know what humans look like? How did they take the form? Maybe it is the hypothetical question at the end, but this is also interesting that I think you brought that up.
I think they must have seen that there are so many humans in the galaxy and must have assumed that this is the most powerful race. realize that no, that's not true, and that is a big mistake that they made. And I also like something that I noticed in this episode is right at the beginning when you're introduced to Rojan and Kelinda, they look so pristine. They look a little bit superhuman. Their coloring is mildly different. But by the time Kirk is done with them, they're all ruddy, they're red faced, they're messy. They don't. They're totally disheveled. I thought that was very amusing to watch.
True, very very efficient. Nothing goes beyond what they've already been told. It's super efficient. Yes, you're right. That's what the start of the episode, even the teaser. It's all very well planned. I mean, he doesn't even have to communicate with this team to find out what's going on because he knows they will follow everything to the dot. Exactly what happened also. Just as they spoke, the engineering was in their command, life support was in their command, and finally the ridge was also in their command.
In their command, yes.
It was done. It was done.
It was done until then Kirk found a way to break through that intellectual smugness of theirs and all hell broke loose.
In fact, it's strange that the solution that was finally offered to them was the exact same solution that he offered at the first place. Yeah. Conquer. You can come here, talk to our federation, bring the problem. We will come up with a solution. It's not like you have to solve every problem yourself. Yeah. So, and at the end, that's what he says. Come to us as friends. Propose this. Yeah. We will give you planets to conquer and all that. So, yeah, this is the core idea probably if you really dig like 3 layers deeper. It's the same thing, an alien race trying to vanquish or even a superior race. In Space Seed it was humans, but a superior than Kirk and his gang try to sort of take over and eventually saying, okay, fine, you win, you take over from now on and give us to work on. I actually thought that the approach of the Kelvins in the beginning was pretty odd because considering they are so meticulous and they have done so much research, enough research to actually take on functioning human forms, they kind of overlooked most of the races of the Milky Way galaxy because from our other episodes that we have discussed, we know that the Milky Way has some particularly advanced races like the Metrons and the Organians. So why would a Kelvin, who is obviously not as advanced as either of those two, decide to come here and just take over the galaxy and expect no resistance from the races that are much more advanced than they are? That's one thing. And the other thing is, towards the end, when Kirk offers that friendship treaty, I thought that was a potentially very dangerous move because if you send a robot ship over to Andromeda and the Kelvin Empire and tell them that we are here and we have a federation and we have inhabitable planets, I think you're advertising the fact that the galaxy is available and who knows how they would react, the actual Kelvins over there in Andromeda. I wasn't particularly convinced with that idea. I thought it was very foolhardy and maybe even a little bit foolish. Actually, the exact same warning that I think McCoy or Spock give at the end of Space Seed. They tell him, we won't know what happens to this. I've sown a seed today. Who knows what will happen. Yeah. But I think this is all going to be under the watchful eyes of the Federation. They were just given the planet and be asked to survive there. So I don't think there was under the purview of the Federation. Here it's I don't know, some guy like Ambassador Fox probably would come in, intervene, sign treaty, or that other ambassador, I forget his name. So maybe it was a bunch of those people come and do all that stuff. You never know where this could lead to. Would be interesting. I don't think it was interesting enough for the Star Trek franchise to pick this idea up and give it a second spin to it, or what happens after this kind of a thing. What happens after? I found it intriguing. Yeah, it is very intriguing. I would have liked to know what happens if a robot ship actually does go to the Kelvin Empire with this proposal. I have no idea how they would react. They might break it down logically, or they would think that people are offering for them to come and conquer. Yeah, and now they also have a new element or whatever be it, right? So they're friends, so they can share that technology of the paralyzer and that metal which is denser than dibernium, he says.
Yes.
God knows what happens because of that. Maybe that will
Yeah.
keep them ready against the Kelvins, or the Kelvins start working without because they're scheming anyway. You can't get them out of that. Maybe they will go behind the humans and send another robot message saying, hey, these humans are actually quite stupid.
Yeah.
Listen to their actual official ship. Send another
Yeah.
multi-generation space in 300 years. Who knows what will happen.
So we have at least 4 or 5 centuries before anything happens.
Yeah, 300 for the ship to go and another 300 for it to come. So you're talking 30th century, not even
Yeah, and
24th
maybe
century.
another 200 years for them to sit and ponder over this strange proposal that will probably short circuit them. So maybe about 800 years, probably. Long time.
Come, my children.
I think Landru would be a nice repellent for any Kelvin. Just have to project him somewhere, and that would be a deterrent.
You're not one of the body.
Just tell that to them long enough.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if in the 300 years ago, when was it? We are now in 2024. So 1724, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a ship goes from here in 1724 and lands somewhere with the ideologies that were present there. 1724, they were only kingdoms, right? So they're all our colonies. The colonization had started in the 1700s. So I think that's the reference probably here I'm getting of the Kelvin
Maybe.
Empire, saying you're 300 years behind times, right? So in 300 years, who knows what will happen.
Yeah. And what happened was they ran into Captain Kirk. All plans thwarted.
Yes, according to Rojan, his efficient crew, right? So Spock,
very efficient.
Scott, and McCoy. Yeah.
They're so efficient. I really liked how Hanar turned into this emotional, angry mess after McCoy's interventions. And it was so, I mean, I don't know whether that injection actually brought about some sort of repressed resentment against Rojan, because Hanar, he was talking about not liking the way he ran the ship and wanting to.
Yeah, I don't think it came out of the blue. I think there's probably some kind of history behind that.
I feel like they really don't like each other, but because they're trained in such a way, they can't exactly say much. Until McCoy gave him the courage to just go and yell at Rojan. It was quite entertaining.
No, let's talk about the jailbreak scene. So, or the attempted jailbreak, right?
Yes.
So, this was interesting that they had built the jail in such a short time.
Yeah.
So, looks like they had time to study the humans, become like them, encase in their shells, as he calls it, build a jail which the humans can't get out of. Okay,
Exactly.
so that probably they knew that it can withstand the phasers. It cut it out. Spock
Exactly.
says. All the bases are covered. So interesting that they could build that jail and be ready for human prisoners. I think prisoners.
They're extremely enterprising, and you do see that they are particularly intelligent because they know that if they keep these humans behind those bars that they cannot penetrate, they will not be able to break down those bars. The phasers don't work, nothing works, and if you scare them enough, they feel that the humans would just sit still. But I still feel that they could have done some more homework on the humans, because they grossly underestimated what the human mind is capable of. I think Kirk's creativity played a role here quite a bit, and this is something that the Kelvins never even imagined. For all their studies, for all their superhuman forms that they took on, because in the beginning, like I said, they seemed very pale and kind of a little more than human, too perfect. And then by the time Kirk, who was just a human, not a Kelvin in human form, they looked complete. They were totally out of sorts. So I think they are not as clever as they thought they were, and they could have done a bit more of background study on all the races in the galaxy. So it provided for entertaining viewing, though, because this one mistake brought them down completely.
Yes, yes. Now, in terms of the structure of the episode, also it is built that way. See
Yep.
their superiority, and they take these simple things like let's try to break out of jail, and
Yes.
that didn't work.
That didn't work.
Somebody is killed, so we know that they have even they're far superior than we estimated them to be.
Exactly.
And then the second act, you see that okay, now we have to do something trickery. So Spock pretends he's ill, right? So he that was, by the way, entertaining. The
Yeah, he just
second
collapses.
just collapses. It is incredible how he pulled that off.
And I am also surprised that the Kelvins didn't do any studies on any other race. Very one-track mind they have. If they had done that, they might have known that this is just a ruse. But no, their intellectual capacity has limits. Maybe because they were trapped in a human body.
Or they did not do their study on Vulcans, right? They
Yeah,
think, oh,
that
this
is
is
what I
unknown
thought.
territory. Okay, let them do what they want to.
Exactly. It just takes one mistake to get them wiped out or get them crushed. And I'm surprised that they never even saw that or considered it, because they were so smug about their superiority and their technological prowess that they can't think beyond that. I think that's some sort of intellectual limitation that they've got.
Yeah. And they didn't even go check whether this Rigelian Kasaba fever is a real one or it's just made up stuff. Clearly made up.
Clearly made up, and they have no idea. They just take. I think their capacity for detecting deception is very poor, because they are so
Yes.
easily had.
Right.
They believe just about everything everybody says, and then they get into all sorts of trouble. Like Tomar, he had no clue that he was being played by Scotty, who kept giving him alcohol.
Magic potion, yeah.
Yeah, magic
No,
potion.
no. It starts off with Kelinda falling for the good old age-old trick of, oh, there's something wrong in my prison. Why don't you walk in and get knocked off? Right? This is like a
Yep.
old as dirt trick that we've seen in so many movies and TV series. If you've studied the human, that's the first thing that anybody is going to try.
Yeah, you're
Then
gonna
the
get
second thing,
punched
like you said,
if you
right?
misbehave.
Sometimes they are ill, and you say, "Oh, okay." They didn't see anything wrong with it. He does comment saying, "Oh, he was fine so far,
A minute ago.
but how a minute ago, and now he seems suddenly incapacitated. What's going on?" And like you said,
Yeah. They were very easily fooled. They just take what is said to them at face value. I mean, coming back to Tomar, when McCoy said, why don't you try it before you condemn it? Tomar was quite willing to just take that at face value and eat. And eat.
Yeah.
And eat.
Yep. And Hanar as well, right? Hanar, this guy says, "Oh, there's something wrong with you. I have to give you some, shots." Come on, it could be poison
Multiple
for all.
shots.
This is an enemy. Yeah, he's an enemy. He's not going to be kind to you, right?
Very ridiculous. And McCoy tells him you have anemia, it's because you're not eating food, and there's just those supplements, and you need all of these shots, and you need several of these shots. And it sounded so fake, except to Hanar, who just sits there and accepts it, and then finally he gets annoyed and he's still accepting it. But
Probably was the only one who questioned this, played
Yeah.
along. However, she said, "Hey, wait a second. This is what I have already read about. Oh, that's the thing." So she's able to put one to one, and of course she falls for it at the end, and no turning back. But at least she was one person who questioned her, saying, "Hey, wait a minute. Are you playing me? Are you having me?" So this is the only person who even questioned that. Rojan is hopeless. He just fell right into that trap. It's absolutely hopeless.
it's completely hopeless. He's probably the most ridiculous commander I've seen so far, because he's falling for all the deception. He's easily roused, he's easily heckled, and it's very... You can get under his skin very quickly, and he does eventually go into that. He gets to that point where he even forgets that the technology he has can be used to subdue Kirk in just a minute, which Kirk actually points out. But no, Rojan is
Yes.
so infuriated that he wants to get into a fist fight, of all things, with Kirk. So he's not
Yes.
particularly up to speed.
Yeah. Kirk attributes that to them taking this human form.
Yes.
The whole thing is about that. I don't know. I don't know if that's a compliment or is just stating it, because he says you dull down, buddy, after you become human. So
Exactly.
I don't know. That's not very flattering, but yeah, that's precisely what Kirk says. You know, you'll have
But
to
I'm
learn to
also,
deal with these emotions.
exactly. I'm also quite amazed at the Kelvins for turning themselves into humans permanently. What kind of stupidity is that? Why did they do that? I mean, there should be a point when they can turn back to their original form and return to their true natures and their true states of being. Instead, for some reason, they decide to turn themselves completely human for all time, even when there is a
Roj,
crisis. Yeah, it's a
Sorry, Rojan does try to explain that by saying that to be using your ship, we
yeah.
have to take these forms
True, but that's a
on, because if we
temporary thing.
take our
Yeah,
if we take on our original forms, you're going to be in trouble
yeah.
with your
True,
ships.
but
With our ships, it's all designed for that.
true, but I thought when things started going downhill and when the fisticuffs started and when there were all those fights and them struggling with all of those emotions and all of it put together, I thought he might have at least gone down to the shuttlecraft bay and at least turned himself back just for a little while so that he knows what he's doing. But
Yeah, that frustration is. I think he expresses that to Hanar, saying, "I'm sick and tired of being surrounded by this openness and all that. I want my
yes,
constrained space. I want to be out there in space and be confined to a smaller place like a ship." Right, I'm sick and tired of
yeah,
these planets. So I don't know. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. This whole, like I said, I mean, we doubted the success of this plan, and I think it's true. It's not going to work because
yeah.
they don't like being on free and open planets like these. They want things around them so they can keep controlling it. That's what even
Yeah.
Kelinda says at some point.
True, they might have got along very well with the Klingons. As a matter of fact, it might have been really interesting to see what would have happened if they had taken Klingon form, because their emotions and anger are about 100 times more
Yeah,
than a human. Might have been quite
yeah.
fascinating.
Or the other idea could be Kirk dropping them into the neutral zone and say, okay, that side of the neutral zone is where your homes can be. Go.
He could just, drop them on this side and say, all you have to do is cross it and you'll be perfectly safe. And therefore, they can get fired on by both the Romulans and
Yeah, I meant Romulans. Sorry, I said Klingons, but I meant Romulans in my head. The
yeah.
neutral zone between Romulans
They could
and
just breach the
human.
neutral zone and go have
Yeah.
some sort of Saurian brandy with the Romulans. That might have been very fun to watch.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, one more thing I wanted to discuss was simple biological function, and you have a lot of literature around it. To me, I
Yeah,
felt
oh
like,
my God,
what is
yes.
she saying? What is she saying?
That's
I mean,
such a
yes, she's
roundabout way
technically
of talking
correct.
about it.
Technically, she
And
is right, but what an odd way to voice it out is what I thought.
yeah, and also, as she progresses through the storyline, you find that she's thinking about this a lot more than the humans on the ship. Her mind is full of that all the time. So
Yes, come and apologize to me. I like that. You
that's
do that to me.
she
So
she
clearly,
has
obsession. Obsession. That's what it is.
obsessions, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
they are all caught in the whirlwind of human emotions, and they
Yeah, the
don't know
one
what to
quote
do.
that stuck to me the first time I watched this episode for a long time was
Yeah,
Rojan saying, "Very odd creatures these humans are," after being kissed by Kelinda. So
yeah.
that quote stuck to my head for a really, really long time after I watched the episode.
So they're so odd that the Kelvins were utterly fascinated by them and decided to take on their form so that they can experience the oddness for themselves.
Yeah, and what I also noted was in third act, the beat got really progressively faster because you're seeing Tomar, Scotty, you see Spock, Rojan, you see Kelinda, Kirk, and then you see there's like lots of cuts in between, and you can see, and of course back to Tomar, Scotty again, and then you see Kelinda, Rojan again, and all that. So it's really building on the pace. There was, to me, in this episode was, I don't know, obvious that I actually made a note of it and said, here, look, the pacing has really got on.
I think also that the Kelvins were, by the time they got to that stage, towards the end of the episode, the Kelvins were completely losing it at a very rapid rate. And all of them were being attacked by these humans in different ways, psychologically attacked, they were being gaslit, they were being confused. And I think there was only so much they could take before everything started unraveling all at once. And I think also the pacing of the story, like you said, at that point was very, very effective to show that.
Yes. And of course, culmination was Kirk slapping Rojan. And it boiled down to the fist fight of this episode. So, yay for that.
Yay for the fist fight. And Rojan was so confused by then that he forgot all his technology and all the threats that he had made to Kirk. He just wanted to punch him. That's it. Knock his teeth out.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, Kirk explained to Spock and McCoy saying, hey, I'm stimulating him. That's what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything different.
So they pushed him right back.
So then, of course, the final apology and all that happened. And Kirk gets the command, back the command.
It was all just too much for them when they gave up. They can't deal with humanity anymore. They just can't deal with it. They'd rather just take that planet and sit there in the sun.
McCoy said, oh, that planet was kind of nice. You should take that.
Nice. You could go back there. One thing I appreciate about them is, like you said, they had all these plans and they were pretty clear right from the beginning. You have the Enterprise, we'll take the Enterprise. Thank you. That's it. It didn't work. Still.
Correct. No, they had it planned out neatly. I mean, this is how we're going to do it. After the barrier, everybody is neutralized. They become these shapes. Only we retain 4 of them. This much is the food supply. We can keep them. All that figured out, right? So, in fact, they call the humans troublesome because it goes against their plan. These guys will hamper their plans.
And boy, are they troublesome. It's troublesome is an understatement.
Exactly. And that's what they got. You signed up to be... you got it hands full. All right, so let's move to the likes and dislikes section. So, Parvati, what did you like and dislike about this episode?
I enjoyed this quite a bit. I enjoyed this right from the beginning, and it explored how an alien race can experience human emotions so well, and they are quite frustrated also by it. And I thought this episode showed that so well. The steady deterioration of the Kelvin intellect and their self-confidence and their self-assurance. They lost everything within a very short span of time because they dared to take on the form of a race that they knew nothing about. Intellectually, they might have known, okay, the humans are like this biologically, they are like this physically, but they did not do enough research to actually study the race, and that got them into a lot of trouble. And I feel like this story portrayed that very, very effectively, and it was quite gripping. And I also like those scenes with Scotty getting drunk and Tomar getting drunk. And my favorite scenes were probably with Hanar, because he was constantly being injected, like I said, with all sorts of medicines, and he doesn't even question it. He just loses his temper. It was interesting. And also the one part that I really liked was the end where Rojan, after that fist fight, was so tired that he's willing to accept any solution that Kirk comes up with because he just can't think straight by now. And everything is out of reach for him. So, I enjoyed this a lot. I don't think there's anything that I disliked as such. It was a very interesting episode. What about you?
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it also, the entire episode. And this is one of those episodes where you can watch it any number of times. I mean, this is definitely one of those ones. I particularly like the idea of the whole Kelvin conquest and how they are plotted out the whole thing, and it's all going to script, according to script, is what the Kelvins thought, at least. So that part was really intriguing, and how the humans really spoiled their well thought out and intricately thought of every detail kind of plan. How do they really thwart it was interesting. And like I said at the start, this was Spock's idea. And not Kirk. Kirk is the usually inspired one, but this time it was Spock who observed, because at that point Kirk has pretty much given up, and is having his food with these three other guys, and it's like, okay, now I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. I'm not going to send us on a suicide path. Anyway, Rojan knows about it, so it's not working. I don't know what to do. And then Spock says, oh, curious how this... So he's actually maintained a cool head and trying to get the whole thing. Even the suicide, he says, that part, he says, where the self-exploding thing, he says, oh, we have to keep that option open. It's an option. It's just the way it is. It's an option. It's nothing bad, nothing good. Of course, Scott was his funniest, another thing that I really liked. And this is way better. These ideas were way better than the whole illogical stuff that we had in I Mud, where they had a series of plays and over the top kind of a thing. Here it was very easily followable, funny still, but you could follow it, you could see what's happening and all that. A little aside was this dodecahedrons apparently was, I think I saw it somewhere. It was Gene Roddenberry's idea when they were discussing this script. He said we can't just show them as paralyzed throughout these places, because it sort of becomes very difficult to shoot them all like that. So he said, what do we do? And this guy from his table pulled this shape out, and he said, make them this. So that was a dodecahedron, and he said, make them all this, and that's how the whole idea of making them into that shape started off. And it was pretty effective. I like that, because if you in another episode later on in season 3, you see that humans are can be reduced to 1 pound or 1.5 pounds of this material, and that's what this is. It's compacted into crystalline stuff like that, because that's all the essence of humans. If you remove all the water, that's what you get. That's another place where you see it. Correct. And I loved all the Kelvins. All of them had interesting characters and whatever their mannerisms and all that. Particularly Hanar, even though his screen time is so small and short, I absolutely loved him. Completely.
He's I think the only Kelvin that did not show us much was Drea, the navigator.
Yes. True.
Everybody
we do not know.
Had a pretty prominent role. Even Hanar was just so animated by the time the episode finished.
Correct. Drea is...
One more thing, one more thing I really liked was Nurse Chapel trying to
talk to Dr. McCoy when they brought in Spock. Stokelin, Doctor, why?
She is completely confused. Just follow orders, will ya?
This is not the time for your doubts.
Yeah, seriously. Don't think on your own, woman. That was what he's saying.
Just follow orders right now. But I think that Tomar was one of those big, hulking, not very intelligent characters, so it wouldn't have made much sense to him anyway.
But Nurse Chapel figured it out when he said the whole Rigelian Kasaba fever thing. Was in there. And she's like smiling and smirking, and the Rigel. Oh, he's pulling off that stunt. Okay, got it.
True.
But I wonder what Nurse Chapel's objection was in the first place of giving Stoker in. So that's one thing I was wondering about.
It's probably, I don't know, it could have been just a saline mix for all that doesn't do anything, but she knows that. But
so so basically, if Spock is in trouble, why are you giving him something so ineffective? That's probably what was her objection.
Something that will bring him out of the trance, out of whatever sickness he has. Instead, McCoy has decided to give him something that is obviously ineffective. That is obviously, I don't know, it could be a vitamin compound or something equally silly. It's not meant for diseases, but that's probably why she was so confused.
And he uses the same thing when Kelinda and Kirk are in the room, and they these two want to give them some privacy. They say, "Oh, it's time for my that again, it is Spock who says it's time for my Stokelin, shot. Let's get out of here." McCoy just watches both of them with gaping mouths, like, what's going to happen next? As if watching a movie or something.
And Spock has to kind of tap him on the shoulder. Come on, doctor, let's go. It's
time for my Stokely.
That was very nicely done.
Yeah. So that brings us to the hypothetical question. What would you like to change or get explained from the screenwriter episode?
Well, I would really like to know how they decided upon humanity. The Kelvins decided upon humanity as their ideal choice, because you couldn't be further from the truth. Why didn't they choose the Vulcans, or maybe even those androids on Mud's planet? Those would have suited them perfectly. And those androids are from Andromeda, so I guess that might have worked a lot better. There's some discrepancies from what I could see. I mean, not that I'm just nitpicking, but still. And it also seems to me that the Kelvins did not do enough research on the human mind, and they just completely and utterly underestimated how creative humans can be. And if they had studied the literature of whatever, just studied humans in general, they wouldn't have made such a huge mistake, is what I feel like. So maybe some explanation on that would have been nice. And I also would really like to know why Kirk wants to invite the rest of the Kelvins over into the Milky Way, because that may not end well. What prompted him to be so generous is the question. Even with the Federation, I'm not sure that's a great idea. So those are the only two things I would like to have explained. What about you, Bala?
Change-wise, I don't want any changes. This is fine as it is.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I don't know, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What do the Kelvins really, really look like? So, when Spock is doing his mind meld thing and what's her name, Kelinda, reacts to it, and he's just before he's thrown, a short visual of what he saw, like a being or something. That would give us a very good glimpse. I mean, he describes it. What all he saw later on, he describes that. But you have to pay really close attention to it, and it's what I think. But perhaps that could have helped us know what kind of threat we really are facing. It's like a 100-foot tall Kelvin somehow sort of become this little human. So that would give us the scale of the difference between humans and these Kelvins. So that strikes some kind of fear, and we know that there's no way you can do it through conventional means. These are not creatures you can just conquer.
That's true. And if Rojan had somehow pulled his true form just once, he would have scared all the humans sufficiently.
Yeah.
And if Kirk had actually seen the true form, I doubt he would want to be friends with them, because you don't know what you're dealing with. But,
yeah. In fact, in one of the Men in Black movies, they have such a creature who takes on a human shell, and later on he gets out of that shell, and all you can see is the human shell, almost like a blow-up doll, and out comes the creature. And I don't remember what the creature looked like. It's huge and disgusting for us to look at, that kind of a thing. So I'm not asking for that thing, because that's too much when it's not needed for the story. For the story, I think one glimpse of it, just to strike fear into anybody who's watching it, rather than the humans there.
That would have been an interesting perspective.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So thank you so much, Parvati. Thank you for the analysis and how it went about. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you and bye.
Bye, everyone.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us, and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.